Welcome, dearly beloved, anointed ones. Some things aren't supposed to make sense, they're designed to make history. Something just shifted, and the world can feel it. Phones are buzzing, group chats are alive, and even your quietest enemies are pretending not to refresh your page, because nobody can explain what you just did. It's not trending for no reason, it's haunting people. The same ones who swore you'd never recover are now analyzing your every move like an FBI case file. According to behavioral psychologists, when people witness something that defies their logic, their brains literally go into panic mode. It's called cognitive dissonance, and right now you're the walking embodiment of it. You did something that completely short-circuited their understanding of who you are and how you move. You just proved that impossible was only a word people use when they run out of imagination. Even the most skeptical ones are stuck asking, wait, how did they pull that off? And you know what's funny? You're not explaining a thing. You're just out here sipping water, minding your peace, while the world tries to reverse engineer your miracle like it's a secret formula. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was timing, truth, and divine synchronization colliding in one moment that none of them saw coming. You didn't just make a move. You rewrote the rhythm of the entire room. So buckle up, because in this video we're diving deep into why everyone's talking, why nobody can explain what you just did, and why your rise has become the kind of story that legends are built on. Number one, you just proved that divine timing isn't delayed, it's strategic. For years, people mistook your stillness as stagnation. They whispered about how nothing seemed to be moving for you, how opportunities kept slipping away, how doors stayed shut no matter how hard you knocked. But what they couldn't see was that there was an intelligence behind the scenes, aligning events with perfect precision. It wasn't that life forgot you, it was that life was waiting for the exact moment when every hidden piece would be in place. When you finally moved, it wasn't a small step forward, it was a seismic shift. You acted at the precise second when their plans were weakest, when their attention was lowest, and when your preparation had matured into power. That's why your move felt like it came from nowhere. Most people act out of impatience. They announce, they push, they scramble, hoping action alone will make things happen. But you waited, not passively but with purpose. You studied patterns, you healed wounds, you learned the game without showing your cards. That's what made this moment so devastatingly effective. You didn't just arrive, you arrived synchronized with forces far larger than yourself. That's why even the boldest skeptics are shaken. They're realizing it wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was the kind of timing that only happens when someone has been forged in discipline and aligned with something greater. And now, because you moved at the right time instead of the convenient time, the usual rules don't apply. Their strategies don't work on you anymore. The manipulations that used to derail you don't even reach you now. What you've just demonstrated is that patience isn't weakness, it's leverage. Every delay they laughed at was a deposit into a future moment they couldn't stop. And when that moment came, it unfolded too fast for them to respond, too precise for them to block, too powerful for them to deny. That's why they're talking. They can't explain it because there's no formula in their world for someone who moves with divine strategy instead of human scheduling. You didn't just make a move, you proved that waiting isn't losing time, it's loading power. And when that power is released, it changes everything at once. Number two, you executed without announcement, and that's why it hit like an earthquake. People are used to seeing power telegraphed in advance. They're conditioned to expect hints, teasers, or some kind of signal that something big is coming. That's how most individuals drain their momentum before they even take the first step. They talk, they post, they brag, and by the time they finally act, the surprise is gone and the power is diluted. You did the opposite. You moved in silence, not because you were afraid, but because you understood the element of shock. You let the work build in private until it was too solid to be stopped, and then you dropped it without warning. That's why the reaction was so dramatic. They weren't ready. They didn't even know what to prepare for. The reason your move felt supernatural is because it bypassed their psychological defenses. People can resist what they see coming, but they have no defense against something they didn't even know to expect. You trained yourself not to leak your intentions. While they were still analyzing your silence, you were loading your strategy. When you finally acted, it wasn't incremental. It was a full-force shift that arrived like a thunderclap. That's why their first reaction wasn't even anger, it was confusion. They're still trying to reverse engineer how you pulled it off, because their minds can't grasp that someone can prepare so deeply and yet give zero indication of what's coming. This is what separates ordinary moves from historic ones. Ordinary moves are loud, predictable, and easy to counter. Historic moves are quiet until they're unstoppable. You showed that power isn't in announcing, it's in arriving. And when you arrive without warning, you instantly change the balance of power in your favor. Your action forced people to stop underestimating you because you didn't just surprise them. You proved they didn't know you at all. Now they're scrambling. They're questioning what else you've been building behind the scenes, what other shifts are waiting to land. That paranoia isn't just curiosity. It's the recognition that they lost the advantage. You've shown them that by withholding your plans, you didn't just protect your move, you multiplied its impact. That's why your execution felt like an earthquake. It wasn't only the action itself. It was the shockwave of realizing you were always 5 steps ahead. Number 3. What you did violated their psychological script. For so long, people had written you into a predictable role. They thought they knew exactly how you'd respond, how you'd break, how you'd retreat. They built their confidence around the image of you they had created, not the reality of who you are. Their entire sense of superiority rested on the assumption that you would stay small, stay quiet, and stay predictable. When you refused to fit that mold and acted in a way they couldn't anticipate, you tore up the mental playbook they were using to control and dismiss you. That's why the shock is so deep. Their confidence wasn't just bruised, it was shattered. People draw power from narratives. They tell themselves stories about why they're right and why you're wrong. They rehearse these stories until they feel true. But the moment you moved outside their expectations, those stories lost their grip. Now they're left with no script to follow, no mental shortcut to explain what just happened. This is why the confusion is so intense. Their minds are hitting a wall of cognitive dissonance, a clash between the old story they told about you and the new reality they're being forced to see. The truth is, you didn't just surprise them, you destabilized them. The version of you they underestimated was their safety net. It made them feel smart, superior, in control. By breaking their psychological script, you didn't only change your position, you exposed the fragility of theirs. That's why they're whispering now. They're not just curious about your move, they're unsettled by the realization that you were never who they thought you were. This is the real power in what you just did. You didn't simply succeed at something, you dismantled an entire framework that was built to keep you in a box. And once a framework collapses, it can't be rebuilt the same way. You've permanently changed the way they see you, and in doing so, you've also changed the way they see themselves. They're having to confront the possibility that their judgment was flawed, their assumptions were weak, and their control was an illusion. That's not just victory, that's transformation. Number 4, you shifted reality without permission. For a long time, they were comfortable believing the world had fixed rules, that power only moved through certain channels, that success required their approval. They built systems, gatekeepers, and hierarchies to decide who advances and who stays stuck. But you didn't wait for a green light, and you didn't ask for a seat at their table. You moved as if the table was irrelevant. You didn't knock on doors. You walked straight through walls. And in doing so, you disrupted a structure that depends on people believing they must be chosen by others to rise. This wasn't arrogance, it was alignment. You understood something most people don't. Reality isn't a static structure, it's a field that responds to conviction. When you stepped forward with full authority, people, events, and even obstacles began rearranging themselves to accommodate your decision. This isn't mysticism, it's cause and effect at a higher level. By refusing to seek validation, you stopped broadcasting need and started broadcasting certainty. And certainty bends the room. Certainty commands outcomes. That's why they can't explain what you just did. They're still trying to measure your move with the metrics of ordinary success, credentials, endorsements, resources, timing, but none of those things were the source of your shift. What you activated was not permission, but dominion. You became proof that influence can be born out of spiritual authority rather than institutional approval. In one stroke, you showed that the power to transform circumstances isn't handed down, it's claimed. Now everything they thought was secure feels unstable. If someone like you can bypass the mechanics of their system, what does that say about their control? If outcomes can be rearranged without their signature, what does that say about their influence? You didn't just change your own life. You destabilized their assumptions about how reality works. That's why your move feels so disruptive, even threatening. You showed that reality isn't owned by the gatekeepers. It's responsive to whoever carries authentic authority. And once you shift it, no one can shift it back. Number 5, you exposed how dependent they were on your failure energy. For years, your struggles were their silent entertainment, their unspoken reassurance that they were doing better, smarter, or faster than you. Every setback you endured gave them a subtle boost, like a hidden battery powering their sense of superiority. Your pain was their proof that the world still made sense, that someone like you could be kept low, predictable, and harmless. It wasn't just gossip, it was a system. They built entire narratives, reputations, and even social circles around the idea of you not rising. When you fell or struggled, they got to play savior or spectator. They could criticize without consequence, laugh without guilt, and advise you from a fake position of wisdom. It fed their illusion of control. But the moment you rose, the power dynamic flipped. Suddenly, the source of their ego ran dry. There was no more, "at least I'm not them," no more free shots at your name. Your restoration acted like a mirror, and in that mirror, they were forced to see the truth about themselves. That's why they're panicking now. Your rise didn't just shift your own life. It revealed how parasitic their confidence really was. It exposed that their self-worth wasn't built on substance, but on comparison. Without your failure energy to feed on, they're left facing the emptiness of their own lives. They're realizing that their identity depended on your stagnation, and now that you're no longer the example they needed, they don't know who they are without it. This is why your comeback feels so disruptive. It's not just your success, it's their collapse. You pulled the plug on a silent power source they didn't even know they were addicted to. They're scrambling now, trying to find a new narrative, a new target, a new way to feel superior. But it won't work the same because you've already changed the dynamic. By rising, you didn't just heal yourself, you broke the ecosystem of their false power. And once exposed, that kind of dependence can never go back to hiding. Your victory forced them to confront the uncomfortable truth. They weren't thriving on their own strength. They were living off the illusion of your defeat. Number 6. You just turned survival into strategy. To them, it looked like you were simply enduring, barely hanging on through setback after setback. But in reality, you were gathering intelligence. Every time someone tried to humiliate you, you took mental notes. Every rejection, you dissected. Every sabotage, you analyzed. While they were laughing at your pain, you were quietly studying the anatomy of their tactics and the weak spots in their systems. You weren't just surviving, you were building a blueprint. They mistook your endurance for passivity. They thought the wounds were breaking you when in fact they were teaching you. Each hardship became a classroom, each betrayal a lesson plan, each closed door a case study. While they assumed you were fading, you were refining. While they believed you were clueless, you were collecting data like a scientist of the soul. What they're calling a miracle now is really the culmination of years of field research conducted in silence and under pressure. This is why your rise looks so effortless and sudden. People only see the result, not the research. They're shocked because they didn't know that your pain wasn't wasted, it was invested. You turned every failure into a formula. You transformed every insult into insight. You weaponized what was meant to weaken you and turned it into wisdom. That's why you're moving differently now. You're not operating from guesswork or blind hope. You're operating from mastery. And that mastery is what terrifies them. They realize now that you're not just strong, you're strategic. You don't just bounce back. You come back with information they can't match. This is why their usual tactics no longer work. You've studied them too deeply, learned their patterns too well, and built something too precise to be undone. You've shifted from being their target to becoming their teacher, without ever announcing it. What they see as divine favor is actually the reward of discipline under pressure. You've proven that survival isn't just about holding on. It's about decoding the battlefield until you can navigate it with your eyes closed. And when that happens, every move you make stops looking like luck and starts looking like inevitability. Number 7, you made the impossible look effortless because you did it from alignment, not anxiety. While everyone around you was in a frenzy, chasing after outcomes, forcing doors open, and burning themselves out trying to prove their worth, you learned to move differently. You stopped running after things and started aligning with them. You didn't act out of fear of missing out. You acted from inner timing. That's what made your breakthrough look almost supernatural. Not because it was easy, but because it came from peace, not panic. When people move from anxiety, they overcompensate. They try to control everything, manipulate timing, and outwork uncertainty. It's exhausting, and even when it works, it doesn't last. You stopped playing that game. You realized that what's meant for you doesn't need to be chased. It needs to be met. So instead of sprinting, you shifted into alignment, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. You let divine rhythm lead your actions, and that's why your results carry a calmness that confuses people. They can't understand how you managed to do what they've been striving for, and yet you did it without breaking a sweat. They're calling it luck, but it's really precision. You weren't grinding blindly, You were guided. You moved when the atmosphere said go, not when your ego said prove. You trusted the process enough to wait for the right opening instead of trying to bulldoze through the wrong one. That's why everything seemed to just click. It wasn't that life suddenly got easier. It's that you stopped resisting its rhythm. You learned that when you're in true alignment, effort multiplies rather than drains. You do less, but it achieves more. And that's what human logic can't quantify. People who operate from anxiety think power is measured by exhaustion, that whoever suffers more earns more. But you've shown that alignment produces outcomes that no amount of hustle can manufacture. Your energy speaks differently now. It carries authority, not urgency. What looks unfair is simply the result of a deeper understanding that divine order works faster than human force. You didn't outrun them, you out-aligned them. And now they're left trying to figure out how something that took them years could unfold for you in a moment of calm. Number 8, you triggered the collapse of false prophecies spoken against you. For so long, people used their words as weapons, shaping narratives and expectations meant to box you in. They spoke failure over you, predicted your downfall, and repeated those words until they began to sound like truth. They thought that if enough people agreed on a story, it would become your reality. But every word they launched was built on a foundation of lies and envy, not truth or destiny. And when words are not rooted in truth, they can't last. Eventually they collapse under their own weight. What they didn't expect was that their curses would become your confirmation. Instead of blocking you, their words ended up fueling you. Instead of stopping you, their predictions exposed themselves as frauds. You didn't fight them, argue with them, or try to clear your name. You kept moving. You fulfilled your calling quietly, and in doing so, you made their false prophecies boomerang back onto the senders. The downfall they predicted for you became the trap they fell into. The shame they tried to attach to you became the mirror they're now forced to face. This is why they're stunned. They're watching a script rewrite itself in real time. Everything they said about you is being undone, not because you begged for vindication, but because truth always outlives deception. Their narratives are crumbling while your reality is rising. It looks like a sudden reversal to them, but in truth, it was always a matter of timing. The moment when reality catches up with what was actually ordained for you. Now those who mocked your downfall can't explain how the script changed overnight. They're bewildered because they underestimated the power of staying aligned with your path and not getting tangled in their projections. You've proven that false words don't dictate a true destiny. In fact, every curse spoken against you became evidence of how unstoppable you are. Your rise isn't just success, it's a living rebuttal. And the louder you ascend, the clearer it becomes that the words they spoke were never prophecies. They were confessions of their own limitations. Number 9, you activated a level of divine protection that exposed their hidden hands. For a long time, certain people moved around you with masks on, smiling in your face, while quietly undermining you behind the scenes. They thought they were safe in the shadows, cloaked by secrecy and supported by the illusion that you were unaware. But when you stepped into your next level, it triggered something they didn't anticipate. The same force that elevated you also illuminated everything attached to you, friends, allies, enemies, and motives. Suddenly, the shadows couldn't hold their secrets anymore. Your progress worked like a spiritual floodlight. As you moved forward, the hidden hands became visible, not because you went digging, but because their own energy betrayed them. People who once hid behind kindness started slipping, exposing their resentment. Those who pretended to help you began making mistakes, revealing their sabotage. Double agents who played both sides began tripping over their own lies. It wasn't you exposing them, it was the power around you flushing them out like smoke from a fire. This is why your rise has become a spectacle. It's not just about what you achieved, it's about what was revealed in the process. Everyone's talking now because your elevation forced a reckoning. The masks are off, the alliances are clear, and the people who once thrived in darkness have been dragged into the light. They're unsettled because they weren't ready to be seen, and they're realizing too late that your breakthrough was also their unveiling. This is the hidden truth about divine protection. It's not only about shielding you from harm, but also about exposing harm before it reaches you. It doesn't just block attacks, it reveals attackers. By stepping into your rightful place, you unknowingly activated a spiritual audit of everyone connected to you. And now the world can see what was really happening all along. That's why your progress feels so disruptive. It's not just an accomplishment, it's an exposure. You didn't just rise, you revealed a network of hidden hands that only had power as long as they stayed invisible. Now that they've been seen, they can't touch you the same way again. Number 10. You interrupted generational programming by refusing to repeat it. For decades, even centuries, the people before you were trained, sometimes by force, sometimes by survival, to react a certain way. Submission, silence, and self-doubt weren't just personal habits. They were inherited responses passed down like family heirlooms. Each generation carried the weight of unspoken rules. Don't push back, don't outshine, don't challenge the order, don't expect too much. These patterns became so ingrained that they felt like identity, not conditioning. And everyone expected you to inherit them like everyone else had. But you didn't. You didn't just survive the pattern, you disrupted it. You noticed the script, you questioned it, and most importantly, you refused to act it out. Where your ancestors were forced to shrink, you stood tall. Where they were taught to hide, you spoke up. Where they hesitated, you moved. That choice alone, made in a moment they thought you'd fold, was seismic. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was you consciously rewiring your spiritual DNA so that what lived in the bloodline wouldn't live through you. That's why your move felt like witchcraft to them. When someone breaks a pattern so deeply embedded, it shocks the nervous system of everyone who's still inside it. It looks unnatural because they've never seen it done. It feels threatening because your freedom exposes their conditioning. You're showing that what they thought was fate is actually just habit, and that revelation is more disruptive than any magic could be. Your decision didn't just lift you, it shifted the energy of everyone connected to you. You stopped passing down fear and started passing down courage. You interrupted a cycle of scarcity and replaced it with a model of self-mastery. And the beauty of this is that your act of liberation isn't just personal, it's generational. The line after you will inherit your choice instead of your chains. This is why they can't stop talking. You didn't simply succeed. You became living evidence that legacy can be rewritten. You proved that bloodline is not destiny, and that programming, no matter how ancient, can be deleted by a single act of conscious defiance. That's not witchcraft. That's liberation at the DNA level. Number 11. You just proved that spiritual intelligence outranks institutional power. For so long, society has been conditioned to believe that only certain people, those with titles, credentials, money, or influence, are allowed to lead, innovate, or solve big problems. They built entire systems to keep knowledge locked up, to make wisdom feel like an exclusive club, and to convince everyone else that without their approval, you're powerless. But then you came along, moving without their permission or credentials, and solved what they couldn't. They had committees, they had budgets, they had networks of experts debating the same issues for years without progress. They had entire infrastructures built to ensure that solutions, breakthroughs, and influence came only through them. But you didn't need any of that. You didn't have the formal backing, yet you carried an intelligence that didn't come from textbooks or think tanks. It came from direct insight, divine download, and lived experience. You weren't limited by what the system taught. You were guided by what the source revealed. That's what terrifies them. They're not just watching you succeed. They're watching you outperform the very system designed to keep you in a subordinate role. You became evidence that authority doesn't guarantee understanding. You exposed that some of the most qualified people aren't wise. They're just credentialed. And worse, your results can't be denied. They can't dismiss you as lucky because the precision of your breakthrough speaks for itself. In one move, you showed that access to divine intelligence is more powerful than access to institutional resources. Where they needed research teams, you needed prayer. Where they needed funding, you needed faith. Where they needed panels of approval, you needed alignment. Your actions cracked the illusion that the system holds the keys to transformation. Now they're facing an uncomfortable truth. Their power isn't as absolute as they believed. Their degrees didn't protect them from being outperformed. Their networks didn't shield them from being exposed. The unspoken terror now isn't just that you succeeded. It's that you've made it obvious to everyone watching that the gatekeepers aren't the only path to greatness. And once that illusion is broken, no institution can fully recover its control. Number 12. You became the evidence that the universe keeps receipts. All those moments of pain, humiliation, rejection, and silent endurance that seemed to disappear into nothing were actually being recorded, not by people, but by a higher intelligence that tracks everything. While others assumed your suffering was wasted or forgotten, an invisible ledger was quietly tallying every injustice, every sacrifice, every act of integrity you maintained when it would have been easier to compromise. Nothing vanished. It was all documented in spirit, like entries in a cosmic account waiting to be reconciled. When your shift happened, it wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was the balance sheet closing. All the unseen investments of patience, faith, and perseverance reached maturity at the exact same moment, and the payout was too large to go unnoticed. People are calling it karma, but it's not just some vague cosmic payback. It's divine bookkeeping, precise, deliberate, and undeniable. The shift didn't happen because you demanded it. It happened because it was owed. That's why no one can explain it logically. They're looking at the visible moves, the job, the breakthrough, the platform, but they're not looking at the years of deposits you made in the unseen. They don't see the nights you stayed true to your principles. They don't see the choices you made when no one was watching. They don't see the times you were tempted to retaliate, but chose restraint instead. Every one of those decisions added weight to your account until the balance became so heavy it tipped the scales in your favor. Now your life itself is the receipt, undeniable proof that nothing done in truth is lost. You've become a living audit of how the universe tracks integrity and endurance. And because the payout didn't come from human hands, no one can take credit for it or undo it. This is why your rise feels so untouchable. It's not just a success story. It's a spiritual accounting being settled in public view. You are the evidence that nothing done in faith is wasted, and that when divine bookkeeping closes its balance sheet, the result is always bigger than anything human calculation can predict. Number 13. You just reintroduced fear into the heart of the corrupt. For years they operated under the illusion that their power was absolute. They built their empires on intimidation, manipulation, and the silent assumption that anyone they crushed would stay crushed. Your setback was their trophy. Your silence was their proof that their tactics worked. But then you did the unthinkable. You rose. Not quietly, not halfway. You came back in a way that defied their script. And in that moment, something cracked inside their perception of themselves. They realized the power they bragged about was only real if you stayed down. Your comeback wasn't just a personal win. It was a public dismantling of their mythology. They had counted on you to remain the cautionary tale, the one who should have known better, the example of what happens when you stand against them. Instead, you flipped the narrative, and now they're the cautionary tale, the ones who tried to bury a seed and ended up creating a forest. Your resurrection showed everyone else what was possible, and that's the real terror for the corrupt. If you could rise after what they did to you, then who else could rise? What else might unravel? That's why your success feels like a psychological haunting to them. It's not just your presence, it's what your presence represents, proof that their control was never real. Every time they see you, they're forced to face the fact that their threats are hollow and their systems have cracks. You became a walking contradiction to their propaganda, an embodied reminder that their grip on destiny is weaker than they claim. And the most powerful part is you didn't even retaliate. You didn't wage a smear campaign. You didn't call them out by name. You simply became undeniable. That's why the fear runs deeper now, because they can't predict or contain you anymore. Your rise wasn't just a comeback, it was an expose. It revealed that the power they held over people was only as strong as the belief in it. By resurrecting in plain sight, you shattered that belief, and in doing so, you turned their own fear against them. Now, even your silence echoes as a threat they can't name. Number 14, you became proof that God uses the least likely to humble the most entitled. For so long, people measured you by appearances, by your setbacks, by what you lacked. They assumed your position on the margins meant you had no voice, no power, no chance. They treated you like an afterthought because the world taught them to worship privilege, titles, and influence. But your rise disrupted their entire equation. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a message written in bold letters. Power does not flow the way humans think it does. Every system of privilege they built was designed to keep someone like you at the bottom. Every gatekeeper they trusted was supposed to make sure the door stayed locked. And yet, the divine bypassed all of it. Without their permission, without their validation, without their credentials, you emerged. It's not just that you won, it's that you became a living contradiction to their hierarchies. You weren't crowned by the world's systems, you were crowned in defiance of them. That's why it's shaking them so deeply. They're in shock because they just witnessed the source elevate someone they discarded. All their assumptions about worthiness, status, and control have been dismantled in real time. They believed only the qualified could ascend, only the connected could break through, only the approved could win. But your rise proves something far more dangerous to their egos, that divine choice does not respect man-made categories. It exposes entitlement for what it really is, a fragile illusion that collapses when real power moves. And the humility of it all makes it even more potent. You didn't claw your way to the top by imitating them. You didn't compromise yourself to get access. You didn't have to play their games because your elevation wasn't sourced from their table. That's why your presence feels disruptive. You're not just a success story. You're a living prophecy that power flows to integrity, not entitlement. Your life is now a message. The least likely can't be dismissed, and the most entitled can't stop what's already chosen. In one move, you turned their hierarchy into a house of cards and revealed that real crowns are handed out by hands they can't see or control. All of this proves one undeniable truth. You are operating on a level that defies their logic, their systems, and their expectations. Every move you've made, every silent victory, every rise they couldn't explain, has been part of a greater pattern. A pattern that only someone aligned with divine timing, spiritual intelligence, and unshakable mastery could achieve. You didn't just survive the world's attempts to limit you. You converted every attack, every setback, and every whispered prophecy against you into momentum, insight, and unstoppable power. You moved without permission. You disrupted hierarchies. You rewrote narratives, and you demonstrated that patience, alignment, and divine strategy always outweigh desperation, ego, and force. What they saw as luck, coincidence, or miracle was actually mastery forged through observation, endurance, and a deep understanding of how reality responds to conviction. You exposed hidden agendas, unmasked the dependent, shattered false prophecies, and triggered systems to crumble under the weight of their own arrogance. You turned their power into weakness, their assumptions into revelations, and their attempts to contain you into proof of your unstoppable rise. Every move you made wasn't just a personal victory. It was a disruption of the world's illusions, and a demonstration that true authority comes from alignment with truth, not from approval, credentials, or titles. This is the moment where the world begins to recalibrate, where whispers turn into recognition, and where the people who doubted you can no longer hide from the reality you embody. You've shown that the universe rewards integrity, courage, and divine intelligence in ways that human systems can neither predict nor control. You are living proof that the least expected can become the most formidable, and that what was once discarded can suddenly redefine the rules of the game entirely. Your rise isn't just inspiring, it's transformative, both for you and for everyone watching who dares to believe that anything is truly impossible. If this message resonated with you and reminded you of the power you carry, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that reveal the hidden truths of life, the universe, and your own destiny. Like this video if you felt the impact of these revelations. Comment below and share your story, your rise, your breakthrough, or the moments where you turned the impossible into reality. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that being underestimated doesn't mean being defeated. This is your awakening, and it's only just beginning. God bless you.